Welcome back to the TrustWave Keynote stage. Please welcome Chief Executive Officer of the Electronic Transactions Association, Jason Oxman.
All right. So we're back on the TrustWave Keynote stage to have a great conversation about the future of the M&A space in payments, the future of the legacy industry, if you will. I don't mean that pejoratively, I just mean companies have been around for a while. And we've got a great CEO perspective from across the ETA membership. As you all know, there have been a lot of headlines of late and a lot of speculation about what's still to come as far as acquisitions in our industry. Also a lot of transformation in the sales channel, frankly. And we see it here on the show floor with traditional ISOs joined by ISVs and VARs, payment facilitators and others in the sales channel. And we see a melding of hardware and software happening as well as traditional manufacturers partner together with the software manufacturers or software programmers in the industry to move their products and services to the next level. So I thought it would be great to have a conversation today with three CEOs from our industry to hear about what they're expecting next. Three CEOs from ETA member companies that represent what I would call diverse segments of our industry. So we have the traditional bank-owned processor, a traditional hardware manufacturer, and one of the largest ISOs in our segment. And at least one of our three CEO keynoters has had, let's say, a very interesting week in the last week. So please help me welcome to the TrustWave Keynote stage, Neil Randell, who's CEO of First American Payment Systems, Paul Gallant, who's the CEO of Verifone, and Jamie Walker, who is the CEO of Elevon. Gentlemen.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So thanks for taking the time to be with us here on stage. I know it's a busy time here at the show for all of you. Neil, I want to start with you on that question of what's going on in the acquisition landscape. So I'm sure there hasn't been a shortage of speculation about what's future of First American, but you've seen a lot of your peers either acquire or be acquired in recent months. So we'll start at the macro level, I guess. What's your assessment of the landscape?
So
and you can share any news you want.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't have any news about anything other
Okay.
than just what perspective would be. I think that we go through these cycles. It seems like every 5 to 6, 7 years. We're going through one today. There's a lot of consolidation for scale. People are buying technology. I mean, there's several acquisitions that have been made in the past year that are all about technology. And I think we're continuing to see that. We continue to invest in that technology because it does play a role in payments today. I don't think it's going to slow down. I think there's a few left of the larger processors out there today that are still available, and maybe that's a First American at some point, but we don't have a for sale sign on the house today.
Right. Jamie, Elevon certainly is a potential acquirer out there in the market. I mean, you are an acquirer, but you're also a potential acquirer. Can you give us, at the macro level, your assessment of what's going on out there in the payments acquisition space? And again, if you want to share any thoughts about what Elevon might be doing in the near future, please feel free to do so.
You know, we've been spending a lot of time from an acquisition perspective, looking at various assets. And the way I assess it is it's hot, and it's expensive right now. You look at, you know, what Paul's company went through. Congratulations, Paul, by the way. It's incredible to see, you know, what things are going for out there, but it just shows the value in our business and what we can produce, and you know, the market's really reacted to it. So my assessment is it's going to continue. There's going to be more, I think, consolidation in the industry for sure, and you know, it's across the board. You see various strategies. You see acquirers getting into the software space. You see software companies get into the acquiring space. So, you know, as you look at from a competitive standpoint, your partners are quickly becoming your competitors, and it's kind of become a jumbled mess in a lot of ways. So, but it's an exciting time to be in this space.
Well, that's certainly true. Paul, what's new?
Nothing.
Okay. Other than
nothing.
driving up Jamie's costs of potential acquisitions in the future,
Right.
let me say congratulations on all you've accomplished at Verifone, transforming the company, and congratulations on the validation of that transformation last week. So tell us how this Francisco deal came to be, and And still, even though you're done, share with us your assessment of what we're going to see in the rest of the industry as far as acquisition in the future.
Well, sure. Thanks for having me. Look, I think that the M&A environment in financial services has always been hot. The financial technology space is even hotter, probably. And so I just think what's driving all this is that, on the one hand, you see what's happened in consumer electronics, right? I mean, it is such a different world today than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And you look at the merchant space, not much has changed. The fact of the matter is that, like many of you, you go to a store and you look at the checkout counter and it looks wrong. It looks like a Zenith 25-inch color TV in my uncle's, basement. Wires everywhere. So look, I just think it's inevitable that there's this wonderful opportunity to change that and to create real value and drive solutions where it's not just a payment. It's the whole solution set that makes a merchant as successful as their consumer is with their smartphone and all the ecosystem. To do that, you need a lot of capital. To do that, you need a lot of people that have operated in silos to come together, because what they're selling is a solution, not a bunch of different pieces. It's very hard to do that as a public company. You need to really have a partner who's got immense conviction. And in our case, the folks that got excited about us, they got excited about our strategy. And it's a perfect example of a PE firm that's really acting more like a strategic buyer. Because a PE firm doesn't pay a premium like that unless they have real conviction in where the market's going to go and whether or not you're a vehicle. I think you're going to see more of those types of acquisitions.
Yeah, and Neil, in the traditional ISO space, which of course is ETA's roots, that's how we started 30 years ago, we've seen that transformation with the addition of technology services. I don't think a lot of people know this, but First American has some technology, some software solutions that you've deployed to your customers as well in a couple different verticals. Is the transformation of the ISO to a broader service provider, as Paul was talking about with the addition of technology, is that something we're going to continue to see as well?
Yeah, I think we will. I mean, I think the misnomer about First American is that we don't have a lot of this ISV business. We don't have a lot of maybe technology deployed that others. We actually do. We bought things in the past 8 years, 9 years that are all ISV related. We just have never rebranded them First American, so they operate under their own brand. I do think we're going to continue to see technology going out into the ISO market. They're using technology today, whether it's integrating through our ISV APIs or they're doing things on their own to go out and reinvent themselves. So we'll continue to see that. It doesn't make any difference whether it's an ISO shop that's being supported or it's our direct business that's being supported. We're seeing change, and that change is at light speed.
Yep. Jamie, I can imagine there are a lot of great things about being owned by a bank. And maybe some things that make your positioning in the marketplace a little bit different than some others. Obviously, banks are very heavily regulated, and U.S. Bank is no different than that, so I have to assume that it influences the decision-making process. But when you're evaluating the landscape of potential technologies to acquire, sales channels to acquire, and the like, can you explain to us what might be different about being a bank-owned acquirer as opposed to a standalone company?
Yeah, I would say being owned by specifically a U.S. bank, there obviously are some significant advantages. It's it's got best-in-class ROE, ROA type metrics that really allows us, from a capital perspective, to have sort of not unlimited, but almost unlimited access from a capital perspective. I can't remember the last time I went to my parents and said we need an investment in this from an inorganic perspective or organic perspective, where they weren't there to help us from a funding perspective. So, being part of U.S. Bank is a tremendous opportunity. The challenges is just from a competitive standpoint, we have a lot of partners that are banks as well. So it's that balance of, as U.S. Bank has done better over the last 10, 15 years and built a name for itself, our bank partners have had to trust us that we have those Chinese walls and maintain those Chinese walls over time, and I think we've done a great job of managing that. But from a compliance standpoint, no doubt, we try to leverage it as an advantage. As we show up to our bank partners and go to them, we know what they're going through from a compliance standpoint. They trust us that we're going to do the right thing for them. So as much as it does create some additional burden from us, as we look at some of our competitors or some that aren't bank owned, we really try to flip it when we go to sell to our partners to say, look, it's an advantage. You're not going to get in trouble with us, and that's how we've managed and work as being owned by a bank.
Paul, I alluded before to the transformation that you've done at Verifone from a traditional hardware manufacturer to things like the Verifone Connect platform, where you've really become a software services company as well. Is that also changing the distribution channel for you? Or is the Verifone channel, the path to merchants, still the same as it's ever been, just adding more? You're still doing the traditional ISO bank processor channel, and then you're adding more to it, or is the distribution channel changing?
Well, look, we are not going to be a merchant acquirer. We are not interested in that business. We work with people that are in that business, and that has been sort of the cornerstone of how we've built our company. And so it's very important to us that Jamie be able to sit with me and his team and go through a deep review of their strategic direction, of what their priorities are, and not for a moment fear that I'm somehow going to take that information and go compete against him in his core business. I think that's fundamental.
There may be another company that you're not mentioning that has a traditional hardware company that's taking a different path.
And by the way, they may be right from a shareholder perspective, but that's just not the DNA of Verifone. That's not how we work. So for us, the key is very, very simple. We recognize that in order to be relevant to Elevon and others, we can't just be a terminal sales company. Merchant acquirers have to compete on a much more than payment acceptance today. And if all we ever did was build the best terminal, we would become less and less relevant. So our approach was, do we really understand how the acquirers are generating growth? What is it that is going to differentiate them? What is going to make them stickier? And how do we expand the TAM, work with them to expand the TAM that ultimately is what they address? And Verifone Connect was exactly that. It's a hardware agnostic platform that's built for an acquirer to be able to deliver a fully integrated payment solution with business software that we all know and love, in a model where the anchor is the payment. And I think that that's something that, that was always the idea of this transformation. It's not over, it's not done. I probably need to go another 5 years. But you know what? It's been a great journey so far.
Great. Neil, you're probably closest to the merchant in First American and helping them make a decision about which hardware to install, what software solutions they need. There's a lot of new stuff out there here on the TRANSACT show floor. There are a lot of companies showing a lot of interesting solutions. How do you decide or help your merchant customers decide, and perhaps even more importantly, how do you arm your team of merchant sales professionals with the information they need to help the merchant pick the right hardware and software solution?
Every channel is slightly different. Obviously, integrated payments or pure software. There's still a lot of terminals that are continuing to be sold. There's still some smaller point of sale systems that are continuing to be sold. I think that we can't be everything to all people. I wish we could, but we can't. We have to choose our equipment vendors, and who we support. And we obviously supported Verifone, very strongly through the years. But we look at a lot of different things. I think that people are looking for something a little bit different at the point of sale. Paul said it, and they are. I mean, it's not just a terminal anymore. It's got to do maybe more than that. but I think you've got to choose your battles wisely and what you're going to deploy, because otherwise you'll have so much out there that your sales reps cannot ingest it all. They're going to make a mess of it in a presentation, and you want to be able to support it from a customer service standpoint. So like I said, we can't be everything that we couldn't support 12 different terminal and directly 3 or 4 different POS systems. We wouldn't be very good at it.
I want to talk about outside the U.S. As we talk about inside the U.S., because obviously a lot of international companies here at TRANSACT, and a lot of opportunities outside the U.S. for a lot of those companies. Jamie Elevon obviously has business around the world. You've got a team of 4,000 people, many of whom are here in the U.S. and many of whom are outside the U.S. If you had to pick a country or a region where you're most optimistic about opportunities for the payments industry, where you're spending your time, where your team's spending your time, could you narrow it down to a country or a region where you think there's perhaps more greenfield opportunity for U.S. payments companies to get engaged?
Well, clearly, I'll speak from an Elevon perspective. We think the European market still has significant opportunity, as they were first from an EMV perspective and migrating to that, but we have really not seen where the U.S. is quickly going from integrated software type spaces. That has not happened as much in Europe today. So we see significant opportunities of not necessarily getting in first, but getting in there quickly and really taking advantage of a lot of what we're seeing in the U.S. What it will happen and migrate in Europe. We have, as you said, we have about 1,000 employees in our European space. We're top 5 in about 6 countries over there. So we have a pretty strong perspective of what's going on in the European market, and that's what I would see is the biggest opportunity in the European region is that integrated space is not taken off, and as those customers are looking for those solutions, I spend a lot of time in Europe, and you still see a majority of them with terminals. Most of them are still with terminals. That's a lot to do with how EMV got rolled out there. But that'll change just as quickly, and that's where we see the biggest opportunity.
Yep. Paul, Verifone's dominant here in the U.S., but looking outside the U.S., where do you think the best opportunity to become dominant outside the U.S. is?
So we try never to use the word dominant for lots of good reason, but
beloved.
There aren't any lawyers in the room,
yeah, exactly.
So maybe we can go with dominant.
Verifone is beloved in the U.S.
Yeah, look, I think we see opportunity everywhere, okay? The war on cash is far from over. There's good reason to believe that we may have hit an inflection point in terms of acceleration, because the cost of acceptance has gone way down. There are so many different models out there now that even don't have a terminal, that are using peer-to-peer. That's going to take off, I think, at a rate that probably none of us can predict, but are probably going to fall short of the actual. I'd say the second thing is that the amount of pain that our industry puts a merchant through today is extraordinary, okay? And I'm not talking about a year ago or 5, like today. If you're a merchant and you want to go start a business, you have a horrific experience. And I think that we have to do better, right? Starting a business should be an exciting and happy experience. It should be met with absurd onboarding rules and integration issues and phone calls. And that is a big opportunity. And that's not in the United States, that's not in Europe, it's everywhere. Because very few places in the world, we have a giant Nordics business. You'd think that the Nordics are so advanced, right? Still not where it needs to be.
Interesting. Neil, an international perspective from First American?
So really the only, we've got business a little bit in Europe, but most of our business is Canadian. So we bought a company 8 years ago called IETS Payments that focused in on not-for-profit payments, so it's all card-not-present business in Canada. Continuing to see a lot of development, and we too are seeing some need in the European space, mainly in the UK, for integrated software, which all that business is all integrated software. So that's our only foray. I can't claim 1,000 employees in Europe.
That's okay. Canada still counts as a foreign country.
It does.
I can't have a conversation, Paul, with you without talking about EMV and asking about contactless. Let's do it. What's your assessment of EMV deployment in the U.S., where we are today? We talk about numbers, 55, 60% of merchants have upgraded. But I'll ask you the question this way. We're seeing issuers here in the U.S. express a lot of interest in putting contactless cards in the market. And 2018 is a year this is actually going to happen. Is that going to be more of a catalyst for the terminal upgrades, for the EMV upgrades for merchants, if they're seeing these contactless cards in the market and think, well, maybe this is something that consumers are actually going to do?
Well, first, I think contactless is genius. I think it works beautifully. If you've used a contactless card, you'll never want to go back and use the MagStripe or EMV slot. It works great. The issue is it's never simple. So our technology, our terminals have had EMV capability forever. It took a long time to turn that on and to certify it. They've had NFC chips in them, since the mid-2000s. And you'd think it's pretty easy. Oh, good, now I have a card that's got NFC capability, I'm gonna tap it. Well, guess what? Now you gotta certify that capability, and it's a different kernel, and it's a different set of use cases. So, I think the acquirers are committed. I think the issuers are committed. We certainly are committed to the technology enablement of that. But there is a process to certify, and there's no shortcut around it at all. And so it's cool, but we're gonna have to wait a little longer to have it be ubiquitous.
What about at the pump, AFD? Are we on track for that?
Yeah, so the pump is an interesting thing. Visa's push out of EMV by 3 years surprised everybody. I think everyone thought it was gonna be a year. Nobody thought it was gonna be 3 years. The people that had already started doing the conversion, they actually went ahead and finished it. And so about 25% of the 2 million pumps in the United States today, believe it or not, are EMV card enabled. About 1% of them are turned on. And the reason that only 1% of them are turned on is, what's the incentive for them to turn them on? They get protection until 2020. So that's going to happen. So we have 75% of the hardware upgrades to go. We do that with a partner, Gilbarco. Whenever you have to install something into a gas pump, take my word for it, you don't want to be the one with the screwdriver. You want to let the professionals do that, and that's what Gilbarco does. And so, we're just late for absolutely no good reason. If Visa had stuck to its calendar, it would have gotten done. If they extended it by a year, it definitely would have gotten it done, but it's pushed out. Inside the store, the convenience store, about 80% of it is done and running and working beautifully.
Jamie, you bring a unique perspective to us here as a representative of both an issuer and an acquirer. So I guess on the EMV question, I'd ask you a slightly different take, which is this issuer interest in contactless real? Whatever you can provide us from US Bank's perspective on the issuer side would be helpful. And what are you seeing on the acquiring side about ongoing merchant interest in EMV upgrades, and is contactless going to drive that as well?
So from an issuing perspective, I'd say it's definitely real. I mean, it's getting traction. The issuers are talking about it, and I don't know if saying getting excited about it, or is it something we need to do? And with that, I'd say from a acquiring standpoint, I don't see it as a transformational. I think it'll move the needle some, but it's not going to move the needle any more than, I think the biggest issue, you look at EMV and how we've struggled with it is, as a consumer, you have a different experience at every single retailer, where we've actually gone backwards a little bit in the experience now, where it used to be you swipe the card, you knew, you'd sign, things would go. Now you dip your card, and you're not sure if you take it out or do I wait to sign or not. And that experience is, we've kind of bastardized that experience, and contactless is going to potentially confuse our consumers even more, versus simplifying it more, because I'm sure even contactless will be rolled out differently as Paul rolls it out from a Verifone perspective, or other software providers roll it out. It'll have a different experience versus in the past it was a much more seamless experience even from a swipe perspective. So I guess I'm a cynic when it comes to it's not going to move the needle.
Okay. Neil, what are your thoughts? What do you hear from your merchant customers about EMV and looking ahead to contactless?
I mean, we've been, the EMV piece of it I think is just kind of a no-brainer. I mean, we've been advocating this for the past several years, trying to returnalize. Whether it was turned on or not is another story. I think contactless, I think you got to listen to your customers and clients. Those are our sales channels, so we need to listen to those sales channels and see what they're seeing in the marketplace. I will agree with Jamie. I don't think we're going to see plus payments because we've got contactless out there. I don't think there's going to be more of something. I think it's just an easier way to use it. I think Europe uses it a lot today, and it's a great experience for them, and they wouldn't want to go back. It's education. I think there is going to be some confusion at the point of sale. Some of these devices they'll have it, they'll go to a location, try to use it, it won't be enabled, and it'll be a bit of a problem for those. But I think ultimately we're going to get there if the issuers can get behind it. It's kind of a chicken and egg, and we can't drive the issuers.
Let me piggyback a little bit on what you said, because I think it's important. Payments is an and business, it's not an or business, right? So what you're seeing is just the proliferation of choice. That proliferation of choice has not yet made it to the excellent experience. It's just lots of different kinds of experiences. That has to be, in my opinion, finessed. And the fact of the matter is, one can think about that by vertical, one can think about that by geography, and almost all of that has to be done with software. Right? The world of, contactless means, I need to have something different in my hardware. That's over. That's completely over. Everything that will happen that matters going forward in our space is software. The hardware, it's going to be funny coming from me, but it's kind of a commodity, right? It's what you do with it and how you make it develop a experience that is anything but a commodity.
But contactless is really probably more SIC code driven than it is broad merchant driven, right?
Yep.
So you mentioned software, and we're seeing a lot of startup activity in the software space, and I want to talk about startups and get your all's perspective on what you're seeing in the payments technology startup space, particularly because in just a few minutes after we wrap up here, we're going to announce the winner of our payments pitch off, and we've got the startup zone here, a bunch of incubators and startups from across the country. Jamie, Elevon has the Grove, in which you do a lot of work to help startups come to market. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the Grove these days and your assessment of where the most interesting activity in the startup space is taking place and what you're watching there?
So what the Grove is, it's our innovation/product team that we started back in 2013, and we just announced we're going to double the size of that team. We're going to have about 200 people here in Atlanta, so we're real excited about that investment. So, what the Grove is and what it's going to be is, we talked a lot about, I think Paul said it, we're not easy to work with. Whether it's a consumer, whether it's a merchant, and it's not unique to Elevon, but we have our own pain points, or it's our partners. We have to make this experience easier, and our customers are expecting it more and more every day. So when we look for startups, we're not only looking from a technology perspective or a software perspective. A payment solution is how are they making it easier for their customers and that a customer experience, because that is critical to, from a boarding perspective and just from a customer experience perspective, what they expect these days. Expectations, especially for smaller businesses, they want to be treated like a consumer, and they want to be signed up in 2 hours. They want to be taking transactions the next day. So we need to offer that experience in a seamless way, and those are, as we look at the type of technology companies, one of our strategies is we're trying to get in earlier and earlier in these startups. That's just a shout out to any startups here. We got our strategy guy over there, you can talk to him. But we're trying to really get in earlier, invest with them earlier, because that helps us, because we can't do it ourselves. We're too big to go after all these new type of software solutions.
Brian, do you want to raise your hand so you can be pummeled by all the startups and the,
That's right.
You're not taking that? You're pointing to Guy? Okay.
Right.
So everyone should go see Guy? All right, very good.
Thanks.
Neil, a lot of the acquisition activity in our industry has been for technology. And I'm curious, from your perspective, you've done some technology acquisitions already in the ISV space, as you mentioned. Is there a particular area that you're kind of keeping your eye on, where you might think about adding to your suite of technologies, or something where you're seeing some excitement in the payments technology startup space?
So as Jamie said, I mean, they're expensive. Some of the smaller ones don't have they've got revenue, but they don't have earnings, and it gets tougher for us to acquire something like that. I think the ones we've bought historically have been at a time where we were able to buy it at a more favorable multiple. And so we've looked at things to add on to some of the things that we've already got. We believe we've got a good stable of products. We continue to invest in those products. We continue to grow that organically when we can't find the acquisition. So it is tough, because I mean, Jamie's right. Some of these prices are just really they're head turning. So
right. And Paul, are you done on the acquisition front now? I mean, you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons you decided to do the deal you did is it gives you more flexibility than being a publicly traded company. And now that you're a software service provider, are you still looking out at the landscape, looking at potential startups for acquisition, or are you going to be building the capabilities in-house? What's kind of your roadmap from here?
Well, I think we do a build versus buy on anything that our clients need. And sometimes you think you're saving a lot of money by doing it yourself, only to find out that, quite the contrary. So we've learned how not to do acquisitions, which is a very valuable lesson. And then we've, of late, did some acquisitions really well. I'm in the acquisition of talent. More than anything else, what my business is going to require is a talent base of highly motivated, very solutions driven, very experience driven type of people. You haven't really had that in a terminal company, right? We have fabulous hardware engineers. We've got fabulous people that know everything there is to know about security. But when it comes to solving some of the intractable problems of seamless onboarding, of being able to give a full omni-channel view, those are different kinds of people. And so more often than not, I'll look at an acquisition and I don't really care so much about the product that they have. I care about the team and what they've done. That, I think, is going to be a theme for us.
Yeah. Interesting times in our industry, and I'd be remiss if I didn't express the gratitude of ETA to all three of you for your phenomenal support of ETA and TRANSACT. I hope you've had an opportunity to see the booths, and Neil, you're new on our board of directors, and we appreciate your serving. Jamie and Paul, you each have your presidents of North America serving on our board, so we appreciate the volunteer time that they give to ETA to help us move the industry forward. And I'd ask you all to please join me in thanking Neil and Jamie and Paul for a terrific conversation.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason, very much.